The first battle you will ever face is not out there in the world. It is right here within your own mind. Every single thought you entertain carries weight. Every story you tell yourself, every belief you choose to hold on to, becomes the foundation upon which you build your life. If you fail to master your mind, then rest assured, the world will do it for you, and the world is relentless. It will feed you distractions, insecurities, fears, and doubts until you become nothing more than a puppet of circumstances rather than the author of your destiny. That is why the ability to take control of your thoughts is not just optional. It is essential. Think about it. How many times have you wanted to act, but your thoughts whispered, * what if you fail? What if people laugh? What if you're not good enough? * those voices are not reality. They are echoes of past conditioning, fears instilled by others, and self. Doubt you've rehearsed far too long. Yet, when you believe them, they feel real enough to paralyze you. That is how people lose control, by letting thoughts dictate their identity instead of challenging them and deciding who they want to become. Mastering your mind does not mean silencing every negative thought forever. That's impossible. It means learning to filter, to choose which thoughts you give energy to. The mind is like a garden. Left unattended, weeds of fear and doubt will overrun it. But when you become the gardener, when you decide which seeds to plant, nurture, and protect, you begin to grow strength, confidence, and clarity. That is where true self-mastery begins. Consider the way most people consume information today. They scroll endlessly, absorbing fragments of other people's lives, opinions, and fears. Without realizing it, they hand their mental space over to algorithms and noise, and then they wonder why they feel anxious, unfulfilled, or directionless. If you want to take control of yourself, you must first take control of what you allow into your mind. What you feed your thoughts becomes the reality you experience. Choose carefully. Read things that challenge you. Listen to voices that inspire you. Surround yourself with people who call you to rise, not sink. Because whether you realize it or not, your mind is always under the influence of something. The question is, will you decide the influence, or will the world decide for you? This is not easy work. It takes vigilance. It takes courage to confront the lies you've told yourself for years. But once you begin, something powerful happens. You discover that your mind is not your enemy. It is your greatest ally. It can imagine possibilities, create solutions, and envision futures that do not yet exist. But it will only do that if you train it, if you discipline it. Otherwise, it will drag you into the same cycles of fear and hesitation you've always known. And here's the truth. Mastery of the mind is not about controlling every thought. It's about refusing to be enslaved by them. It's about realizing that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who chooses how to respond to them. When anger rises, you can choose patience. When fear whispers, you can choose courage. When doubt creeps in, you can choose to act anyway. That is how you take control. That is how you build a life that is truly yours. Because at the end of the day, the world is waiting. It will pull at you, test you, and try to define you. If you do not stand guard over your own mind, if you do not seize that authority, then you will be mastered by forces that do not have your best interests at heart. But if you take control, if you master your mind before the world masters it, you will walk through life with clarity, with direction, and with power that cannot be taken away. And that is where freedom begins. When you finally realize that the greatest battlefield you will ever conquer is the one within your own head. When most people hear the word discipline, they immediately think of restriction, of rules and limitations, of something that robs them of spontaneity and fun. They imagine discipline as a cage, but the reality is far from that. Discipline, when properly understood, is not the chain that binds you. It is the key that sets you free, because freedom without discipline is chaos, and chaos never creates fulfillment. The man who has no discipline is a slave, not to others, but to his impulses, his cravings, his excuses, and his fears. Think about the person who wants success, but cannot wake up early enough to put in the work. He becomes a prisoner of his comfort, or the one who dreams of health but cannot resist every urge to indulge. he is enslaved to his appetite, or the one who wishes for meaningful relationships but refuses to control his anger or selfishness. He ends up destroying the very connections he longs for. Every lack of discipline is not freedom. It is a subtle form of bondage, and most people live their entire lives trapped by it. Now contrast that with someone who has cultivated discipline. They wake up when they said they would, not because it's easy, but because they've trained themselves to honor their commitments. They control their spending, their time, and their emotions. That kind of person is free because they are not dragged around by every fleeting desire. They can choose deliberately, act with intention, and build consistently, and that consistency compounds into trust, achievement, and strength. The disciplined life creates order, and order opens the door to genuine freedom. It's important to realize that discipline does not take away your choices. It expands them. When you practice discipline with your health, you earn the freedom of energy, vitality, and confidence. When you practice discipline in your work, you earn the freedom of financial stability, opportunity, and growth. When you practice discipline with your emotions, you earn the freedom to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting destructively. In every arena of life, discipline is the price you pay for freedom, and ironically, those who avoid discipline end up paying a much higher price in regret. You don't need to start with grand gestures. Discipline is built in the small decisions. It's in putting the phone down to focus on your task. It's in choosing to exercise even when you don't feel like it. It's in writing down your goals and following through even when no one else is watching. These acts may feel rigid in the moment, but over time they create a structure that supports your highest potential. That structure is what allows you to move freely toward your goals without being derailed by distractions. And yes, it's uncomfortable at first. Discipline requires sacrifice. It demands that you trade what you want now for what you want most. But here's the paradox. The temporary discomfort of discipline will always be lighter than the permanent weight of regret. You can suffer the pain of discipline today, or you can suffer the pain of a wasted life tomorrow. One of those pains is temporary, the other lingers until your final breath. So, when you begin to see discipline not as the enemy of freedom, but as its foundation, you reclaim power over yourself. You stop negotiating with laziness, with excuses, with weakness, and you start living in alignment with your highest values. You become reliable to yourself, and there is no freedom greater than the confidence of knowing you can trust your own word. In the end, the question is not whether you will live with discipline. The question is whether you will choose it willingly or have it forced upon you by the consequences of neglect, because life will demand discipline one way or another. And if you embrace it, if you choose to live with discipline, then you will taste a freedom far greater than the fleeting pleasures of indulgence. The freedom of a life lived with strength, purpose, and dignity. Your emotions are some of the most powerful forces you will ever experience. They can lift you to extraordinary heights or drag you into the darkest depths. But the mistake so many people make is believing that emotions are commands, as if every wave of anger, every whisper of fear, or every surge of sadness is an order they must obey. That belief keeps people chained. They lash out in anger and destroy what matters most to them. They run from fear and miss opportunities that could have changed their lives. They drown in sorrow and forget that even despair passes. The truth is this: emotions are not shackles. They are signals. They are messages from within urging you to pay attention, but they are not masters. When you feel fear, it doesn't mean you must retreat. It means something valuable is at stake, and you should prepare. When you feel anger, it doesn't mean you must explode. It means a boundary has been crossed or a value has been threatened, and it's time to think carefully about how to restore order. When you feel sadness, it doesn't mean you are broken. It means something mattered to you deeply, and its loss deserves recognition. The key is to pause long enough to interpret what your emotions are telling you, rather than reacting blindly and letting them dictate your actions. People who let emotions control them become unpredictable, unstable, and often regretful. They speak words they cannot take back, burn bridges they still need, and sabotage their own progress. But people who learn to master their emotions, who learn to treat them as signals instead of shackles, find a deep strength. They become steady, they become reliable, and most importantly, they become free from being dragged around by whatever feeling happens to dominate in the moment. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. Suppression is another form of slavery, because ignored feelings always resurface in destructive ways. It means acknowledging them, respecting them, and then consciously deciding how to respond. That is what maturity looks like. The ability to hold both the feeling and the responsibility, to sense the storm inside and still steer the ship forward. It's easy to justify giving in. You can tell yourself, I was angry, I couldn't help it, I was afraid, so I ran. But those are excuses. You are not powerless before your own emotions. You are capable of seeing them for what they are, data, signals, indicators, nothing more, and when you treat them as such, you gain perspective. Fear becomes a chance for courage. Anger becomes a call to justice handled with wisdom. Sadness becomes a moment to honor love and loss without being consumed. Life will never be free of emotional storms. In fact, you wouldn't want it to be. A life without emotion would be hollow, mechanical, meaningless. But a life ruled by emotion is just as destructive. The balance is found in recognizing that your feelings are valuable teachers, not tyrants. They should inform your decisions, not dictate them. They should enrich your experience of life, not enslave it. Imagine how different your life would be if every time you felt overwhelmed, you didn't surrender to the chaos but instead paused, listened, and then chose wisely. That kind of strength doesn't just make you resilient. It makes you dangerous in the best way, because you become someone who cannot be manipulated by fear, anger, or despair. You become someone who can act deliberately, regardless of the storm within. And that is the essence of self-mastery. To live in harmony with your emotions, neither denying them nor bowing to them, but transforming them into signals that guide you forward. Because when you learn to treat emotions as signals and not shackles, you stop being a prisoner of your feelings and start becoming the commander of your own life. One of the greatest illusions we cling to in life is the belief that we can control other people. Their actions, their choices, their feelings, even their opinions of us. We spend enormous amounts of energy trying to manage how others see us, trying to bend their will, to align with ours, and trying to force outcomes that were never truly in our hands. And the tragedy of this illusion is that it leaves us exhausted, resentful, and perpetually disappointed. Because no matter how hard you try, you cannot make another person think differently, behave differently, or feel differently unless they choose to. The only thing you can control is yourself, your actions, your responses, your perspective. Think about how often frustration arises because someone doesn't do what you expected. A partner doesn't give the love you hoped for. A colleague doesn't deliver the effort you thought they should. A friend doesn't live up to the loyalty you believed was obvious. In those moments, it's tempting to demand change, to believe you can coerce them into becoming the version you want them to be. But the harder you push, the more resistance you create. And even if they comply, it is rarely authentic. At best, you end up with shallow obedience. At worst, you destroy the very relationship you hope to strengthen. The reality is that control over others is an illusion, and illusions come at a cost. They rob you of peace. They rob you of focus. They keep you chained to outcomes you cannot guarantee. When you live this way, your sense of stability rises and falls with the moods and decisions of other people. That isn't control, it's dependency disguised as power. Freedom begins when you shift that energy inward. Instead of obsessing over how others behave, you learn to master your own boundaries, your own standards, your own behavior. You stop asking, why won't they change? And start asking, how can I show up differently? How can I respond in a way that protects my values without trying to manipulate theirs? Asterisk, that shift is where strength lies. Because once you realize that the only person you can truly govern is yourself, you stop wasting time on battles you cannot win and start investing in the one arena where change is always possible, your own choices. This doesn't mean you accept mistreatment or tolerate what violates your dignity. Quite the opposite. It means you recognize your power lies not in forcing others to respect you, but in deciding what you will and will not allow. You cannot make someone honor their word, but you can decide whether you will keep them close or keep your distance. You cannot make someone love you the way you want, but you can choose to love with integrity or to walk away when necessary. That is real control. The authority to direct your own life regardless of what others do. When you let go of the illusion of controlling others, something liberating happens. You no longer carry the burden of fixing everyone around you. You no longer tie your happiness to how someone else behaves. You reclaim your energy and focus it where it belongs, on building yourself, on strengthening your character, on pursuing your vision. And ironically, when you do that, you often inspire change in others far more than you ever could by demanding it. People respond to authenticity. They respect strength. They are drawn to those who lead by example, not coercion. The world is filled with uncontrollable variables. People will disappoint you. They will surprise you. They will act in ways you cannot predict or prevent. And that's the point. You don't need to control them. You only need to control yourself, because when you stop trying to master the minds and hearts of others and start mastering your own, you stop living as a prisoner of their choices and begin living as the master of your own destiny. Who you are is not defined by what you occasionally do. It is not built on a single burst of effort, nor on one moment of inspiration. Identity is carved out of repetition, out of the small, deliberate actions you return to day after day. Consistency is what shapes you. It is what turns intentions into character and habits into destiny. If you want to know who you are becoming, look not at your dreams or your words, but at the actions you consistently choose when no one is watching. It is easy to feel motivated for a day. Anyone can summon a surge of energy to work hard for a short time, to eat clean for a week, to keep promises while it feels convenient. But consistency is different. Consistency asks you to keep showing up long after the excitement has faded. It demands that you honor your commitments on days when you feel tired, when no one applauds, when progress is almost invisible. And it is in those quiet, unseen moments that your identity is being formed. The man who consistently disciplines his body becomes strong, not because of one workout, but because of thousands. The woman who consistently speaks the truth becomes trustworthy, not because of one honest statement, but because honesty has become her nature. The person who consistently practices patience, who consistently learns, who consistently chooses courage over fear, gradually becomes someone defined by those traits. It is not the extraordinary act that defines you, but the ordinary one done faithfully over and over again. This is why consistency is so powerful. It removes the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are. Many people live with an imagined identity. They believe they are hardworking, but their actions don't reflect it. They believe they are disciplined, but their habits tell another story. They believe they are kind, but only when it suits them. Identity is not what you claim. It is what you prove through your patterns. And those patterns are built through consistency. The beauty of this truth is that it means change is always possible. No matter how chaotic your past, no matter how many times you've failed, every single day gives you the chance to cast a new vote for the person you want to become. Each action is a ballot in favor of an identity. One choice won't transform you, but 1,000 will. If you want to become disciplined, practice discipline in the small things daily. If you want to become courageous, confront small fears regularly. If you want to become wise, learn consistently. Over time, these votes add up and your identity shifts, not because you dreamed of it, but because you lived it. Of course, consistency is not glamorous. It rarely feels dramatic. It is steady, often dull, and sometimes painfully repetitive, but it is precisely that repetition that gives it strength. Like water carving stone, your daily habits carve your identity. And while others chase quick fixes and dramatic breakthroughs, those who stay consistent quietly build an unshakable foundation. There is no shortcut here. You cannot claim identity without consistency. You cannot expect respect, trust, or mastery if you haven't proven it through repeated action. But once you commit, once you understand that consistency is the bridge between who you are and who you wish to be, everything changes. You stop waiting for motivation and you start building habits. You stop making excuses and you start making progress. And little by little, without even realizing it, you become the kind of person you once only admired from afar. Because at the end of the day, your identity is not written in your intentions, but in your patterns. And when consistency defines your patterns, it defines you. That is how ordinary actions transform into extraordinary lives, by being lived faithfully, day after day, until they become who you are. There comes a point when mastering your thoughts, disciplining your actions, and controlling your emotions must serve something greater, because all the control in the world is meaningless if it has no direction. Strength without purpose is wasted energy, and discipline without integrity can easily become tyranny. First against yourself, and then against others. To take control of yourself fully, you must align your life with something deeper, something that gives meaning to your choices. That is where integrity and purpose come in. Integrity is not about perfection. It is about alignment, living in a way where your actions match your values, where your words are not just empty promises, but reflections of who you truly are. When you live without integrity, you fracture yourself. You say one thing but do another. You present one face to the world and another in private, and that fracture eats away at you from the inside. You may fool others for a time, but you cannot fool yourself. The gap between your values and your actions creates shame, and shame erodes confidence. That's why people who lie to themselves or betray their own standards never feel at peace. They might succeed in appearances, but inside they are hollow. When you commit to integrity, you build trust, not only with others, but with yourself, and that trust becomes the foundation for strength. You can look in the mirror and know that you are not living a double life. You are not hiding behind excuses. You are not shackled by guilt. You are standing on solid ground, and that solidity radiates outward into everything you do. People recognize it. They may not even be able to articulate it, but they feel it. They sense that you are someone who means what you say, someone whose character does not bend with convenience. That is rare, and it is powerful. But integrity alone is not enough. You need purpose. You need a reason to direct all this strength, all this discipline, all this mastery of self. Without a purpose, even integrity can turn into rigidity, a life of rules without meaning. Purpose gives you a vision, a higher aim that transforms effort into fulfillment. It answers the question, why am I doing this? Why am I enduring the struggle? Why does any of this matter? And when you know your why, you can endure almost anyhow. Purpose doesn't have to be grand in the world's eyes. It doesn't mean becoming famous or changing the entire planet. It might mean raising your children with love and wisdom. It might mean building something valuable for your community. It might mean dedicating your life to truth, to justice, to beauty, or to service. Whatever it is, it must be something you believe in deeply enough that it calls you to rise above comfort, excuses, and distractions. Purpose lifts your life above survival and turns it into significance. When integrity and purpose combine, your life takes on a clarity that others only dream of. You no longer feel the need to chase every passing desire or prove yourself to every critic. You know where you're going, and you know who you are. Your choices become simpler, not because life is easy, but because you have a compass that always points north. even in moments of doubt, even in seasons of hardship, that compass steadies you. It reminds you that every struggle, every sacrifice, every act of discipline has meaning, and this is where true control of yourself culminates, not in domination, not in perfection, but in alignment. Alignment with truth, with values, with a purpose that makes your suffering worthwhile. Because the measure of a life well lived is not how much you controlled others, or how much you accumulated, but how faithfully you lived in harmony with what you knew was right. And when you choose to live with integrity and purpose, you don't just control yourself. You transcend yourself. You rise into a life that not only belongs to you, but also leaves behind a legacy that can never be erased. When you step back and look at everything we've explored, it becomes clear that taking control of yourself is not about rigid dominance or endless struggle. It's about responsibility, freedom, and alignment. It begins with mastering your mind, because if you cannot command your own thoughts, the world will shape them for you. It deepens with discipline, where daily commitment turns chaos into order and weakness into strength. It grows with the understanding that emotions are guides, not dictators, and that the illusion of controlling others must be abandoned if you want true freedom. It solidifies through consistency, as your repeated actions form the identity you carry into the world. And finally, it culminates in living with integrity and purpose, where every choice reflects your values and drives you toward a life of meaning. The truth is, the greatest battle you will ever fight is the one within yourself. And if you win that battle, if you take control of your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, and your direction, then no challenge, no circumstance, no opinion of others will ever truly hold power over you. You will stand rooted, resilient, and free. Because in the end, to take control of yourself is to claim the one authority that can never be taken away, the authority to decide who you will become. And once you seize that, you do not just survive, you rise.